Welcome back to the GCSE Maths Pro YouTube channel. Today we're going to be looking at the start of factorising, specifically when we need to factorise into single brackets. This is part one of the factorising topic. After doing single brackets, you've then got a few videos on how to factorise quadratics in different ways. So let's start with this first question. Factorise 2x plus 4. So first of all, what do we mean by factorising? Well, effectively, a word that we're looking at is factor. A factor is something that will divide into another number or another term, okay? So we're going to be using the concept of the highest common factor for factorising. When we're factorising into single brackets, what we want to do is look at both terms here and see what is the highest common factor between them. So what is the highest common factor between 2x and 4? Now, this could be a number, it could be a letter, or it could be a combination of both. In this case, you can see that we don't have any letters in common. Only one of them has x. So we can't use a letter as a common factor, but 2 and 4, the highest common factor would be 2, as in we can divide 2 into 2, and we can divide 2 into 4, and that's the biggest number. So our highest common factor is what we're going to effectively pull out and put on the outside. So in this case, we've got 2 on the outside, then just put some brackets. The brackets effectively mean multiply. And then on the inside of the brackets, we're going to say, right, okay, well, we've pulled out 2. If I'm starting at 2 and I have to multiply it by something, how do I get back to 2x? Well, this one's pretty straightforward because 2x is just 2 multiplied by x, isn't it? So if I've already got the 2, the only thing that's missing is the x. So I'm going to put the x here, and then this 4 is a separate term. So the 2 on the outside you can see is positive, the 4 is positive. So we're going to put a plus because multiplying a positive by a positive will give us a positive. And then I go, right, I've got 2. How do I multiply that to get to 4? Well, I just need to times it by another 2, don't I? So I need to put 2 there. This is your answer. Now, factorising is the opposite process of expanding brackets. So you can always go and double check, okay, is my answer correct? What I'll do there is just re-expand the brackets. What I mean by that is just multiply it out again. So let's say 2 times x is 2x. Okay, yeah, that's what we had here. And then 2 times 2 is plus 4. Yep, that's what we had there. So I can double check that I factorised it correctly. In this case, I have. So your answer is 2, and then in brackets, x plus 2. So factorising is literally just looking at the terms you have, finding the highest common factor between all of them, and pulling that out on the outside. Then just figuring out, okay, what do I then need to multiply that by to get back to my original in the question? So let's try a few more. Factorise 120 minus 8y. Okay, well, it's going to be single brackets. I'll put those there to start with. What is my highest common factor between 120 and 8y? Okay, so you can see there's only a y in one of them. We don't have a letter in both, so we can't use a letter as a common factor in this case. Then we're going to look at a number. What is the highest common factor between 8 and 120? Well, it is actually, in fact, 8, because obviously 8 goes into itself once, and 8 goes into 120 15 times. So the highest common factor is 8. That's what I put on the outside of the brackets. Then I go, okay, well, I'm already at 8. What do I multiply by to get back to 120? Well, as we've just said, we have to times that by 15. So I'm going to put 15 here. Then I say, okay, I'm at 8. What do I need to multiply by to get back to not just 8y, but that's minus 8y, isn't it? We always have to take the symbol that's in front of the term as part of that term. So this is not just 8y, it's minus 8y. Okay, well, obviously I need to times it by a negative, right, to get it from a positive to a negative. It's already 8, so I technically need to times it by minus 1. However, I need also to have a y. So because there's no y at all, how do I get from 8 to 8y? Well, I also need to multiply by y, don't I? Now, I'm not obviously going to put 1y, because with algebra that's just unnecessary, isn't it? So all I'm going to put is minus y. And again, if you want to double check, okay, is my answer correct, you can expand it again, you can multiply out the brackets and check. But that is your answer. Okay, our next question is getting a little bit more tricky because now we have 3 terms. We are still going to be factorising into single brackets. However, we're going to have 3 terms inside instead of just 2. So what's our common factor, or our highest common factor, between 27x, 45y, and 63? Well, first of all, there aren't any letters in common again, are there? So we're just going to have to focus on the numbers. When I'm looking for a highest common factor, I tend to think of what times tables are all of these numbers in. The first one that comes to mind is 3. Okay, yes, 3 is a common factor, but we're looking for the highest common factor. So, is there another maybe multiple of 3 or version of times tables that works for all of these? Okay, well, I could think about 6, but 6 doesn't actually go into all of those. And then I go from there. What about 9? Yeah, all of these numbers are in the 9 times tables, aren't they? And that is the highest common factor. So I'm going to put 9 on the outside. And again, I'm just going through this process of, okay, if I'm already at 9, what do I need to multiply it by to get back to 27x? Well, I'd have to times it first by 3 to get to 27, and then by x to get the x with the 27x. I'm going to put plus because the next term, we've got positive 9 here and positive 45y there, so we don't need to worry about positives or negatives. How do I get from 9 to 45y? Okay, the numbers, first of all, I normally would have to times 9 by 5 to get to 45. And again, the y just needs to be multiplied as well, so that is added in. And the last one is, okay, how do I get from 9 to negative 63? Well, okay, if 9 is positive and 63 is a negative, then I'm going to have to put a negative here, or a minus. And then this one's just a number, so how do I get from 9 to 63? I times it by 7. So we factorise this fully, we just have 3 terms in our brackets instead of 2. Okay, this next one we now have a combination of letters and numbers that we can use as a common factor. So factorise 15x cubed minus 50x. Okay, so I know it's going to be single brackets. First of all, I'm going to look at the numbers. What's my highest common factor between 15 and 50? Well, I think that's pretty obvious. It's obviously a multiple of 5, so 5 is our highest common factor in terms of numbers. However, in this case, we also can then look at the letters. What's the highest common factor between x cubed and x? Well, they're both divisible by x, aren't they? So I can actually pull out an x as well. So my highest common factor to put on the outside is 5x. And then it's the same from here. How do I get from 5x back to 15x cubed? Well, the numbers first, I have to times 5 by 3 to get 15. And then this is x technically to the power of 1, isn't it? How do I get from x to the power of 1 to x to the power of 3, or x cubed? I need to multiply it by another x squared. Then I look at my next term. How do I get from 5x to minus 50x? So the first thing I'm thinking of is, okay, it's going to have to be a negative, isn't it? Because if 5x is positive and 50x is the negative here, I need to multiply by a negative. Then how do I get from 5 to 50? Well, obviously I have to times that by 10, and then x to x, well, that's just the same thing, isn't it? So actually, I don't need to put anything after that. So let's just move this bracket a bit closer. We don't need that much space. Okay, so that is your final answer. Okay, very similar question here. So if you feel like you've got the hang of it, pause the video and give this one a go, and then check your answer afterwards. So again, I'm going to put single brackets. We're going to look for the highest common factor. I'm first going to look at the numbers. So highest common factor between 8 and 20. Well, that would be 4, wouldn't it? Then what's my highest common factor between xy and x squared? Well, both have an x in them, don't they? So I can pull out 4x. And now just to figure out what goes in the brackets. How do I get from 4x back to 8xy? So the first thing is the numbers. 4 times 2 would make 8. And then how do I get from x to xy? Well, the only thing missing is the y, isn't it? Then how do I get from 4x to minus 20x squared? Again, I'm going to need a negative because the 4x is positive. So I need a negative so that a positive times a negative overall gives me a negative. Then the numbers, 4 to 20, well, I need to multiply by 5. 4 times 5 is 20. And then how do I get from x to x squared? Well, I'm just missing another x, aren't I? So that would be 5x. So your answer is 4x multiplied by 2y minus 5x. Okay, the next one's very similar, but again, we've got 3 terms. So we've got single brackets, however, you're going to have 3 terms inside the brackets. So we're looking for our highest common factor between all 3 of these terms, letters and numbers. Let's start with numbers. The highest common factor between 12, 18 and 30 is 6, isn't it? That's the biggest times tables that go into it. The highest common factor in terms of the letters, we've got x here, we've got y squared and xy. Well, not all 3 of them have anything in common, right? We've got x and xy here, and then y squared and y here. However, across all 3 of them, they don't have a letter in common. So actually, I'm going to write my 6 a lot closer. 6 is your highest common factor. And now, how do I get back from 6 to each of these terms? So what do I need to multiply 6 by to get to 12x? Well, I need to multiply it by 2 to get the 12, and then x to get the 12x overall. How do I get from 6 to minus 18y squared? So again, I need a negative. Times the 6 by 3, and the y squared is just added on. And finally, how do I get from 6 to 30xy? So it's going to be plus because they're both positive. Times it by 5 to get to 30, and the xy is the only thing missing. So that's fully factorized. Okay, this one's a little bit tricky because we've got a few things to take into consideration actually. So, our highest common factor between those two terms. Let's first look at the numbers. 4 and 52. Well, actually, 4 is the highest common factor because 4 obviously goes into itself once, but it also goes into 52. So I'm going to pull out 4. Then I'm going to look at the letters. Now, this one's x to the power of 5 and this one's x to the power of 2. So the highest common factor is going to be your lowest power. So x to the power of 2. Now, there is actually one more thing we can pull out. As you can see, they are both negatives. So I am actually also going to pull out the negative. So my highest common factor is minus 4x squared. And then our process begins again. How do I get from minus 4x squared to minus 4x to the power of 5? Well, we've already got minus 4, so we're missing x cubed. And then the next bit, now, it's already negative on the outside, right? So that's why I'm going to make them positive on the inside. Because when we multiply negative by positive, the answer is still negative. And that's what we want. So I'm going to put plus here. How do I get from minus 4x squared to minus 52x squared? Okay, well, 4 goes into 52 13 times. And the x squared is the same, isn't it? So we don't need any x's. So that will be just plus 13. So we've got minus 4x squared on the outside, and then x cubed plus 13 on the inside. Okay, so factorize minus 3x to the power of 4y plus 51 x cubed y to the power of 5. Again, we've got single brackets, and my highest common factor, okay, 1's plus, 1's minus, so I'm not going to pull out the negative, I'm just going to have a positive on the outside. Looking at the numbers 3 and 51, what's our highest common factor? Well, again, 3 actually just goes into 51 and obviously goes into itself. So I'm going to put 3 on the outside. And looking at the letters, now we need to look at them separately because obviously x is different to y, right? So looking at the x's, we've got x to the power of 4 and then x cubed. So the highest common factor is x cubed. You're going to take the smaller power. And let me just move this bracket along a little bit. And then we're going to look at the y. So here we've got y, which is obviously technically y to the power of 1. And in the second term, we've got y to the power of 5. So in common, they both have y to the power of 1 in common, don't they? Obviously, I'm just going to write that as y, though. So our common factor, well, our highest common factor on the outside is 3x cubed y. So now on the inside, how do I get from 3x cubed y back to negative 3x to the power of 4y? Okay, well, first of all, you can see that we need a negative because the 3 on the outside is positive. They're both already 3, so we don't need to change the number. However, when you look at the x's, we're missing one x, aren't we? Or x to the power of 1. So I'm going to put x here. And again, the y's are already the same. So the only thing missing was the minus x. Then we say, how do we get back to 51x cubed y to the power of 5? Well, those are both positive, so I'm going to put a plus. Then we need to go, how do we go from 3 to 51? Well, we need to times that by 17. If I look at the x's, they're already the same, aren't they? They're both x cubed, so that's fine. We don't need any more x's. But the y's, again, this is technically y to the power of 1. So I'm missing y to the power of 4. And that's your answer factorized. So that was an introduction into factorizing into single brackets and the concept of finding the highest common factor, including letters and numbers, and pulling it out to put on the outside of the brackets. The next videos coming up are factorizing quadratics. Now, there are a few different methods for this, as you can see. We've got the trial and error method, we've got the splitting the middle term method, and we're going to take into account factorizing for the difference of two squares as well. So definitely check out the next videos in this playlist. If you have any questions, let me know down below. Make sure to subscribe and like the video.